Chapter 637. Elder Xuanhu never thought that he would actually be completely resurrected. Even his internal injuries had been healed, and he was brimming with energy and vigor. He didn't need to guess to know that this had to be the strength of that almighty senior who had directly dragged him out of the space layer with one hand. To actually be able to bring someone back from the dead, what kind of formidable power was this? Elder Xuanhu's gaze couldn't help focusing on the simple black ring in Little Silver's hand. He didn't know its origin, but he was sure that it was the ring's power that had brought him back to life. A magic ring with a resurrection attribute, it was obvious that it had to have been made by that senior behind the scenes. When he had seen a pair of big hands appear earlier, it had to be this senior who had delivered the ring. Looking at Elder Xuanhu's stupefied face, Little Silver couldn't help spreading his hands. This is all basic, no need to be too shocked. My master actually doesn't need a ring to bring people back to life. Bring people back to life without a magic artifact. Elder Xuanhu's heart shook. Could it be that your master is the embodiment of heavenly Tao? But in the end, Elder Xuanhu didn't dare ask directly, because he had already realized that his strength and that of the almighty senior behind the scenes weren't in the same dimension at all. This almighty senior was even more powerful than President Bai. Even President Bai couldn't create a magic artifact with a resurrection attribute. As far as Elder Xuanhu knew, there was a resurrection spell, but it had long been lost. Furthermore, when he recalled his experience of being resurrected just now, it was more like the power of this resurrection ring had frozen his soul in place and directly used it as a foundation to recreate a brand new body. It wasn't hard for Elder Xuanhu to determine this, because he had been conscious throughout the resurrection process. As for what Little Silver said about being able to bring people back to life without a magic artifact, Elder Xuanhu felt that he had no reason not to believe it. This was a power that was in a completely different dimension. At that moment, Elder Xuanhu didn't even dare think about what level that senior was at. I'm very curious. After experiencing death by self-detonation once, Elder Xuanhu had calmed down. Given the strength of this senior behind the scenes, it should be easy for him to kill President Bai if he wants to uphold justice. Why go through so much trouble? Because this is a society ruled by law. Little Silver replied swiftly. Elder Xuanhu was lost in thought at this response, and he had nothing to say in response. Although Little Silver hadn't been with Wang Ling for long, he had learned a lot about the rules of human society. Most of the time, one's worldview would be influenced by one's surroundings. Little Silver had always felt that following Wang Ling unswervingly was the right decision. As Elder Xuanhu had said, given Master's methods, it would be a piece of cake for him to get rid of President Bai. But in the current situation they had to send this President Bai to prison alive to play mahjong, which was much more difficult than just getting rid of him. Because there were still too many unknown secrets about President Bai. Sitting cross-legged, Elder Xuanhu looked inside his brand new body. As expected, the curse mark which President Bai had originally carved into his body had disappeared. This curse was used to prevent members of the Demon Hunters Association from divulging the organization's secrets, but it was only effective on humans. Among the many high-level members of the Demon Hunters Association, only Mr. Liu was a demon. Now that Elder Xuanhu thought about it carefully, he felt that the reason President Bai kept Mr. Liu by his side all this time was probably to prevent Mr. Liu from carelessly divulging the secret. Everything made sense now. Elder Xuanhu sighed in his heart as he recalled President Bai's furious demand to find Mr. Liu as soon as possible when there was no news of him a while ago. Since you already have Mr. Liu's statement, why do you still insist on finding me? Elder Xuanhu asked as he stared at Little Silver. After all, Mr. Liu is a demon and humans and demons walk different paths. Even if Mr. Liu has some information on the Demon Hunters Association, it's definitely limited, right? Little Silver replied. Hearing this, Elder Xuanhu's body shook. He never expected this seemingly harmless silver-haired young man, who seemed a little otherworldly, to actually be a guy with a pretty high IQ. In fact, this was indeed the case. President Bai hadn't told Mr. Liu everything, and the truth was that Mr. Liu knew very little. It was actually grenade-throwing Senior Immortal who had taught Little Silver everything in the car. Elder Xuanhu sighed deeply. Since you want to know so much, then leave. I'm willing to tell you the truth. I've already lost this fight. You admit defeat just like that? I thought you'd resist a few more times. You should still have the Tiangang grenades on you, right? Why don't you blow them up a few more times? When they exploded just now, the lightning tribulation inside was like fireworks. I think it was really pretty. Little Silver's eyes widened. Elder Xuanhu realized that this silver-haired young man seemed a little dim-witted. I'm indebted to President Bai, so I really couldn't betray him before. In order to keep this secret, I could even sacrifice my life. But I've already died once, so I don't owe him anything, Elder Zhuowu said lightly. His words were very clear, but Little Silver didn't let down his guard. In the SUV, after confirming that Elder Zhuowu had surrendered, Little Silver used his clone to keep an eye on Elder Zhuowu as he immediately took out his phone and started to type a text message. Out of the corner of his eye, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal glanced at the recipient of Little Silver's text message and felt that the number was a little familiar. "Who are you texting?" "Little Master," Little Silver replied quickly. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was blank. Master was Wang Ling, but who was Little Master? "Brother Silver, is this Little Master related to Brother Ling?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked. "Of course, isn't Little Master the scapegoat for Master?" Little Silver replied. Realization dawned on Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. So this Little Master was talking about Audiobook. What freaking Little Master? After Little Silver stayed by Elder Zhuowu's side for about 10 minutes, the police were the first to arrive on the scene. Because of the thunderstorm caused by the Tiangang thunder, the residents in the neighborhood had been alarmed, and a number of fire trucks and police cars had swiftly sealed off the basement of this apartment building. Although the basement was already a mess, when the police and firefighters arrived, none of them took action. That was because before they had arrived, Warden Liang had called from the top to tell them to follow Director Zhuo's arrangements. Zhuo had been the chief commander of President Bai's case from the very beginning, so it was quite reasonable for him to be in charge of this matter. "That's the situation, Mr. Little Silver. Director Zhuo will be here soon." The district police captain saluted Little Silver. On the side, Elder Zhuowu, who was sitting cross-legged, raised his eyelids lazily. "Director Zhuo? Who is this?" He thought the name sounded a little familiar. "My Little Master," Little Silver replied. "Very strong." Of course. The Master of Shadow Stream, Devil Emperor Guapai and the Master of Immortal Mansion all fell at his hands. Chapter 638. Elder Zhuowu was more well-behaved than Little Silver had imagined. Before Zhuo had arrived, he had been sitting cross-legged on the spot and hadn't made any strange movements. Little Silver was worried that Elder Zhuowu was feigning surrender, so he had been using his perception to check if there were any fluctuations of spirit energy coming from Elder Zhuowu. He was worried that Elder Zhuowu would tip President Bai off, so he had been on guard. Even if it was a small communication spell, there would still be spiritual power overflowing when the spell was cast. But Elder Zhuowu looked like he had completely surrendered and wasn't putting up any resistance at all. "Brother Little Silver, you've worked hard. Leave the rest to me." Zhuo and Little Silver took over. The moment he saw Zhuo shackle Elder Zhuowu with the spirit shackles, Little Silver heaved a sigh of relief. The spirit shackles were the same treasure that had been used to capture the old devil previously. As long as it was worn, it could completely suppress even the power of a true immortal. But rather than saying that it suppressed power, it was better to say that it suppressed the circulation of spirit energy and prevented it from forming hand seals. Its function was like a spirit energy remover. It was a magic artifact that could forcibly suppress the output of spirit energy. The structure of the spirit shackles was even more complicated than that of the spirit energy remover. Not counting the other components, there were already 6 spirit energy removers sealed inside the spirit shackles. Hence, the development of the spirit shackles had always been quite troublesome. After the old devil's arrest, Huaxiao Nation's Cultivation Academy of Science only had 1 spirit shackles left. Then, the Master of Immortal Mansion had been arrested, and the number of spirit shackles had officially come to an end. The one that Elder Zhuowu was wearing now was one of the ones that the Academy of Science had just produced after working overtime. As far as Zhuo knew, there actually weren't many in stock. Apart from the one that Elder Zhuowu was wearing, there was only 1 new spirit shackles that the Research Institute had produced. If it wasn't for Elder Zhuowu's suicidal tendencies, Zhuo wouldn't have brought the spirit shackles with him. But given the current situation, it was better to be cautious before Elder Zhuowu was officially taken into custody. As Zhuo thought this, he directed someone to take Elder Zhuowu to the prison car. Songhai First Prison had a powerful barrier to suppress prisoners, so after Elder Zhuowu was taken inside, there was actually no need to wear the spirit shackles. An artifact like the spirit shackles should only be given to prisoners who were at the level of playing mahjong. This sudden incident, which started with Elder Zhuowu taking the lead, finally came to an end with his arrest. Zhuo hadn't leaked the news to the media, but had done his best to suppress it. President Bai now mistakenly believed that Elder Zhuowu was already dead, which was a very good smokescreen. Perhaps it could be used as a strategic layout to set precedent by up. Inside the prison car, Audiobookslover sat next to Elder Zhuowu with a calm and composed look on his face, which made Elder Zhuowu feel a little embarrassed. Even if he was wearing the spirit shackles, he was still a murderer who had a certain level of martial arts skills. This person was actually completely unafraid of him. When all was said and done, he was someone who had weathered great storms. Feeling a little uncomfortable under Elder Zhuowu's gaze, Audiobookslover frowned and looked back at him. "You have the right to remain silent." Elder Zhuowu was silent for a while, then couldn't help asking, "Are you really only at the Golden Core stage?" This was what Elder Zhuowu was very curious about. Generally speaking, none of Huaxio's leading cadres were lower than the nascent soul stage, and at the Golden Core stage they were at most police captains or something like that. If a leading Golden Core cadre didn't have any meritorious service, it was actually very easy for people to think that he had gone through the back door. But the problem was that it was harder for an ordinary Golden Core cultivator to achieve meritorious service than to reach the sky. So how this director Zhua had been able to help capture the Master of Shadow Stream, the Old Devil, the Master of Immortal Mansion and Evil Sword God back then was a rather mystical question. Audiobookslover smiled. "What? Are you looking down on Golden Core cultivators?" In fact, Elder Zhuowu wasn't the only one who had asked this question, so Audiobookslover was already used to it. Since he had taken office, there had actually been no end to all kinds of talk about him, but he wasn't flustered at all. Audiobookslover still remembered how he had inexplicably killed the Demon King back then and become deputy director. At that time he had indeed felt very flustered. But that feeling had now disappeared. Because he was well aware that he had a very powerful Shifu. When the prison car was about to reach Songhai First Prison, Elder Zhuowu asked curiously, "Are Devil Emperor Guapai, the Master of Immortal Mansion and Evil Sword God really locked up there?" "Every time, and they're all locked up in the same special cell." Audiobookslover nodded. "Why, do you still want to get their autographs?" Elder Zhuowu looked as if he had been hit on the nail on the head, and he stared at Audiobookslover longingly. Can I?" Audiobookslover smiled slightly. "Don't even think about it. You're too weak to be locked up with them." Elder Zhuowu, Audiobookslover, "But if you're willing to tell me the truth, I can help you get their autographs." Elder Zhuowu, this was a move that Audiobookslover had just thought of, and had been inspired by his Shifu Wang Ling. Why was Loopy Toad so rich? Actually, a lot of the money had been given to it by Audiobookslover, who had asked it to record Wang Ling's daily life at home so that it could comprehend it. What realm was Shifu at? His every word and deed was worth pondering. A while ago, Audiobookslover had asked Loopy Toad to write down all the exercise papers that Wang Ling had bought, and Audiobookslover had run to the bookstore to buy the exact same ones, and had started to do the exercises. Although it had been many years since he had graduated, Audiobookslover firmly believed that his Shifu definitely had a reason for doing these exercises. The Shifu showed the way, but it was up to the individual to cultivate. Audiobookslover had to work harder. Like this time, when he had used Wang Ling's autograph to tempt Elder Zhuowu into confessing, Audiobookslover had comprehended the deal Wang Ling had made with the Heavenly Tao a few hours ago, equivalent exchange. Not only was this suitable for dealing with the Heavenly Tao, it was also suitable for inducing confessions. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, Little Silver and grenade-throwing Senior Immortal successfully arrived at the Wang family's small villa. When they entered, Mother Wang was overjoyed. "Yo, Miss Silver, you're here." Mother Wang had always firmly believed that this fair-faced girl was a girl. Grenade-throwing brought me here." Little Silver nodded. He didn't find it strange that Mother Wang had misunderstood his gender. This was Master's Lord Mother, and he didn't care at all about gender misunderstandings if he could make her so happy. "Where's grenade-throwing? Why don't you come in and sit down?" "He has something to do, so he's going back first." Little Silver waved his hand, then took out 2 large sacks of broccoli from his storage bag. "Grenade-throwing just planted these broccoli recently. They're all for Senior." Mother Wang dropped her forehead. "That's too much." Actually, there was already more than they could eat at home. Chapter 639. Although Little Silver was usually brainless, he was right about one thing, and that was the main reason why grenade-throwing Senior Immortal hadn't come through the door this time. In fact, the main reason was still broccoli. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that he had brought too little. Old man Yuan Longping, the founder of Magic Rice, didn't even need Jinkala to be able to produce 180 million kilograms of immortal rice per mu in the extremely dry and uninhabitable desert of death. What kind of formidable planting technique was this? And most importantly, the old man hadn't applied for a patent for this technique at all. If he had, he would have become the richest man in the world. But he hadn't. That was because from the very beginning, the old man's goal had been to benefit all of humanity. What kind of formidable spiritual realm was this? Grenade-throwing senior immortal felt that he was completely out of his league. When Little Silver went upstairs, he found that Dog 2 was already waiting for him. Master was reading at his desk, and Little Silver didn't dare disturb him at all, because Loopy Toad had already told him earlier that it was a taboo to disturb Master when he was reading or revising. Little Silver was a little disappointed in his heart. He had brought his collar and leash, but given the current situation he couldn't use them at all. It looked like he would have to look for an opportunity later. Dog 2 made a silencing gesture with its paw, then wagged its tail and led Little Silver to the bathroom. Because it had already used Lord Ma once before, Dog 2 was already very familiar with how to activate Lord Ma. Since Wang Ling had been there once before, Lord Ma had already recorded Drought Star's coordinates. This time, when Loopy Toad went over again, Lord Ma could also teleport immediately. When Little Silver followed Dog 2 over and saw the toilet lid slowly open, he had an indescribably shocked expression on his face. Is this Master's enlightened toilet monster? Loopy Toad, Lord Ma, Loopy Toad, you have to call me Lord Ma. Little Silver, do I need to do anything during the teleportation? Do you want to drink water? Lord Ma almost fainted when he heard this. They were both contract beasts. Why was this holy beast so stupid? Loopy Toad, no need, just wait for the transmission. A golden teleportation light will fall on your head later. Little Silver nodded his head. Is that so? Little Silver had actually seen a lot of teleportation magic artifacts before, but most of them had built-in arrays. However, Little Silver didn't see the slightest trace of an array on Lord Ma. Little Silver was very surprised by this. At that moment, on Drought Star on the other side, Immortal Xuanhuan was already halfway through his planet's restoration work. Although Wind Spirit had been the cause of such massive damage, Immortal Xuanhuan was now using the primordial chi stored in the Heart Demon Stone to repair the planet. Not only was he atoning for his own carelessness in creating the Heart Demon Wind Spirit back then, he was also washing away Wind Spirit's sins. Fortunately, the formation of the inner demon was still in the middle stage. Before it completely devoured the main body, it couldn't be too far away from the main body. Thus, Immortal Xuanhuan had always been trying his best to stay away from the human world to prevent the inner demons from plotting against him and committing an unforgivable crime of murder. But in the last few thousand years, because Wind Spirit had used the gate between worlds without permission, there had been a misunderstanding between the demon world and the human world, which had resulted in huge losses for both sides. Immortal Xuanhuan had already thought of a way to make up for this. He was going to contact the human cultivators after Drought Star was repaired and donate it to them. He hoped that Drought Star would become the first third planet suitable for both the human world and the demon world to live in peace. Immortal Xuanhuan wiped at his sweat and floated in the air as he looked at the progress of Drought Star's restoration. Drought Star's surface was now basically complete. Furthermore, Immortal Xuanhuan had repaired the dry and cracked land that had been lacking water to begin with. It was as if he had added a layer of abrasion to it. Furthermore, while the restoration work had been carried out, Immortal Xuanhuan hadn't forgotten to set up a water magic array in the drier areas on Drought Star's surface to ensure that the land here was moist enough. Immortal Xuanhuan had been busy these days repairing the Earth's surface and building a more stable ecological environment at the same time. Hands on his hips, Immortal Xuanhuan nodded in satisfaction. Now, the only thing left is to repair the space cracks. That was because the space cracks caused by the collisions of high-level spells had been torn apart. This was a more troublesome restoration project than repairing the Earth. Thus, Immortal Xuanhuan planned to carry out a unified treatment after the land was completely repaired. The space cracks on Drought Star were actually not as bad as in the demon world. Although space repairs were a little complicated, Immortal Xuanhuan estimated that he would be able to finish them in about a month. Immortal Xuanhuan took out a map which he had drawn when he had been repairing Drought Star's surface. He had already marked out all the places where space cracks had appeared. Let's start with the place closest to us. Immortal Xuanhuan sighed, and after confirming the nearest repair target, he directly flew over. But Immortal Xuanhuan frowned at the scene in front of him, because he realized that there were actually 2 openings in this space. If there were 2 openings, he would have marked them on the map back then. Is this a new crack? Chin in hand, Immortal Xuanhuan frowned slightly as he gazed at the crack. Just as he was about to go forward to take a look, his entire body jerked and he immediately fell back. Even the expression on his face changed. He sensed a strange aura. There was an indescribable smell of danger coming from the space crack in front of him. What's that? Immortal Xuanhuan frowned because the smell coming from the space crack didn't smell like demon chi or spirit chi. Instead, it was a little like the primordial chi, which he didn't have much left in his body at the moment. Could it be? Immortal Xuanhuan frowned as he muttered to himself. He thought of one possibility, which was what second-generation demon saint had described previously in the holy palace of the demon world, which was a vicious beast-level monster that had poured out of a mysterious space crack. Immortal Xuanhuan thought of himself as a more meticulous person. If he had known that there were 2 space rifts here when he had drawn the map back then, there was no way he would have just marked one on the map. This strange space rift was new, and there was an extremely dangerous aura inside it. Chapter 640. This was a xuan, a giant xuan. Furthermore, unlike the species he had seen above the demon world's holy palace before, this was a scavenger xuan with an extremely foul stench all over its body, like a rotting corpse soaked in stinky mud. The smell was extremely pungent. This could already be called a biochemical weapon. Frowning, Immortal Xuanhuan used spirit energy to seal off his nose to temporarily numb his sense of smell, otherwise he felt that he really would pass out from the stench. If this was the case for a grand venerated immortal, then there was no need to mention other people. The current situation was almost exactly the same as what second-generation demon saint had described back then. An inexplicable crack in space, and then a primordial ferocious beast that used primordial chi as its main source of energy. So the question at hand was, where did this ferocious beast come from? How annoying. I'm afraid I'll have to mend the ground again after I've already patched it up. Immortal Xuanhuan sighed in his heart. He clenched his fists and completely concealed his aura, concealing himself in a way that would disguise himself first. This scavenger xuan wasn't big, but it was still a little bigger than the corpse he had seen in Demon Saint's holy palace back then. It wasn't a baby xuan, but a child xuan whose spiritual intelligence hadn't fully developed yet. Although the other party had already sensed his aura, as long as Immortal Xuanhuan didn't alert it, he probably wouldn't provoke it. Even so, this scavenger xuan's senses were beyond Immortal Xuanhuan's imagination. Even though Immortal Xuanhuan had concealed his aura, this scavenger xuan actually didn't seem to lose its direction. Immortal Xuanhuan changed his position several times in a row, and the scavenger xuan also followed suit, its head always aimed in his direction. Was this xuan using its head as a sensing device? Or was someone controlling this scavenger xuan's movements from behind the scenes? Immortal Xuanhuan remembered that in Demon Saint's holy palace, there had been a broken fishing line on the belly of that baby multi-fanged xuan. If this fishing line could be used to conduct and control the xuan like a marionette, then the current situation was a lot more complicated than Immortal Xuanhuan had imagined. Immortal puppet. Thinking this, Immortal Xuanhuan didn't hesitate to open his immortal eye. Light gathered in his orange pupils before finally blossoming. In that instant, it was as if time had slowed down and everything in the world had slowed down. With Immortal Xuanhuan at its center, a faint immortal chi spread out, causing his beautiful red hair to sway slightly. The immortal puppet's power searched the scavenger xuan's body from top to bottom. Soon his eyes trembled. Blade come? Immortal Xuanhuan raised his hand, and several streaks of red light swiftly flew out of his cuffs. He had never taken out his life-bonded magic weapon before because he didn't think it was necessary. But now, in the face of such a ferocious prehistoric vicious beast, Immortal Xuanhuan wouldn't hold anything back, because the slightest carelessness could really endanger his life. These streaks of red light formed a disc in front of Immortal Xuanhuan, and finally joined together to form a blade wheel with 8 openings. When a cultivator reached a certain realm, they would have their own life-bonded magic weapon, which was usually a first-class holy weapon or a world-defying magic weapon. The red blade wheel that Immortal Xuanhuan had summoned now was a world-defying magic weapon that had been forged after being fed with his own blood for 100 years. Red Moon Blade Wheel. Red Moon Blade Wheel had 2 forms. When split, it could be used independently as an 8-sided scimitar for all kinds of miraculous attacks, which was more flexible. The second form, which was the wheel attack in its current combined form, was even more destructive. Currently, Immortal Xuanhuan didn't know what kind of material this fishing line was made of, but what was certain was that this fishing line could actually penetrate space and wasn't corroded by the power of chaos in the space. Attacking purely in its first form, it definitely wouldn't be able to cut the fishing line. Red Moon Blade Wheel was extremely destructive. When all was said and done, it was a world-defying magic weapon. As it flew over, its powerful blade cut through the air and distorted space. The pressure from Red Moon Blade Wheel was so strong that the ground couldn't withstand it and started to crack. Xuanhuan's heart was bleeding. This was the ground he had just restored. But in this situation he had to sacrifice the child to catch the wolf. If he didn't stop this scavenger xuan, it would definitely cause even more serious damage to Drought Star. Clang. Red Moon blade will collided with the fishing line, and there was the dull sound of metal striking metal. Immortal Xuanhuan could faintly see sparks from the friction between the blade wheel and the fishing line. I have to work harder. Immortal Xuanhuan's fiery red Taoist robe flapped in the air as he manipulated Red Moon blade wheel to spin at high speed. The powerful blade scraped against this fishing line of unknown material, and there was an ear-piercing sound. Since Wind Spirit's disappearance, Immortal Xuanhuan had never used his strength like this before. He did his best to make Red Moon blade wheel spin at its fastest speed. It should work. Immortal Xuanhuan furrowed his brow. At the same time, the scavenger Xuan on the ground shrieked as the Red Moon blade disc spun. It was as if the fishing line was connected to its nerves. When the fishing line collided with the Red Moon blade disc, the scavenger Xuan sank into madness and looked to be in extreme pain. Very soon there was a crisp sound. It was the sound of the fishing line snapping. Success. Immortal Xuanhuan was delighted. But the moment the fishing line snapped, the scavenger Xuan started to uncontrollably spit out purple-black rotting liquid onto the ground. Fortunately, this was just a child Xuan and wasn't very big. It was only a dozen or so meters long. If it had been an adult giant Xuan, its wingspan would have been more than 10,000 feet, and Immortal Xuanhuan felt that it would have been very difficult for him to withstand such a vicious creature. Immortal Xuanhuan wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he carefully observed the Xuan in the air for a while, and finally concluded that this scavenger Xuan spitting out rotting liquid was a stress reaction to the fishing line snapping, like a person vomiting karsik. After the line on its back was cut, this child Xuan looked much less ferocious, and its perception wasn't as strong as it had been when it had first appeared. Now that Immortal Xuanhuan was a little stealthy, the other party was already unable to detect him. It seemed that baby Xuan and child Xuan indeed didn't have the ability to attack on their own. Immortal Xuanhuan had been wondering this when he had seen the baby multi-fanged Xuan in Demon Saint's holy palace, but now it seemed that he had an explanation. Whether it was a baby Xuan or a child Xuan, although they had the ability to attack, these prehistoric vicious beasts generally wouldn't take the initiative to attack at this stage. Vicious beasts learned their attack skills from their parents as they grew older. At this stage they still needed enough nutrients to grow, and attacking would usually affect their development. Chapter 641. After spitting out the acid, the scavenger Xuan gradually calmed down. The puppet technique was an evil technique that was absolutely forbidden among human cultivators. This was because the principle behind the puppet technique was very malicious. What it consumed wasn't the energy of the caster, but the energy of the victim. The victim of the puppet technique would continuously produce energy at the cost of their lifespan until they ran dry. Thousands of years ago, when this spell had just become popular, the victims would eventually be completely drained of their energy by the caster before they slowly withered away and died. But the caster would be completely unscathed. Immortal Xuanhuan wasn't sure whether the puppet spell was controlling this scavenger Xuan's movements, but he was sure that the principle behind this spell was similar to the puppet spell. While Immortal Xuanhuan was pondering this, a golden light suddenly appeared in the sky, and Loopy Toad and Little Silver descended abruptly, both wrapped in the golden light shield that Wang Ling had cast on them. After Dog 2's trip to the demon world last time, Wang Ling had reconfigured Lord Ma. From now on, everyone who was teleported through Lord Ma would have their own golden light shield on them, except for those who had been washed away by Lord Ma. Loopy Toad and Little Silver landed in front of the giant scavenger Xuan's corpse. "Senior Dog, why are you here?" Immortal Xuanhuan was pleasantly surprised. Dog 2 stared at the scavenger Xuan, which looked like it had already fallen asleep on the ground, and its heart was also shaken. In the end, it was still a step too late. But Xuanhuan didn't seem to be in any serious trouble, so the situation wasn't too bad. "I predicted that the angler might make a move on you, so I decided to come and take a look." Loopy Toad nodded and suppressed the shock in its heart as it put on an expression as if it knew everything. "Also, I specially made a weapon for you." After saying that, Loopy Toad raised the corner of its eye and motioned for Little Silver to hand over the 3-view-shattering hammer. Everything had been said and done beforehand. When Little Silver handed over the hammer, he looked Immortal Xuanhuan up and down with a very strange expression. Was this Immortal Xuanhuan, a legendary human cultivator in the world today? Little Silver didn't think this red-haired young man in front of him was very powerful. In any case, he was definitely far inferior to Master. Otherwise, how could he not even be able to tell that this Dog 2 next to him was pretending to be a senior? "Senior Dog, who is this lovely girl?" Immortal Xuanhuan looked at Little Silver. "Little Silver, Buttface replied. He's my servant. I'm used to taking him out for a walk. It just so happened that I happened to meet him today, so I brought him along for a walk. Little Silver, Buttface asked, did you see the collar around his neck? Little Silver, holy shit. He had actually dug his own grave. I see. Immortal Xuanhuan had a look of sudden realization on his face. He had thought it was a little strange that this girl had a collar around her neck, but after Dog 2's explanation, Immortal Xuanhuan completely understood. Immortal Xuanhuan scratched the back of his head and couldn't help praising it. As expected of Senior Dog. I've always seen people walk their dogs, but this is the first time I've seen a dog walk a person. Although it was his first time, Xuanhuan didn't find it strange at all. In the cultivation world, strength was always king. Cultivators would choose to rear spirit beasts as pets, but there was no rule stating that some powerful spirit beasts could not sign some labor contracts to hire cultivators. It was very normal for a senior with Senior Dog's realm to have a few human servants, okay? Although Xuanhuan felt that the aura of this fair-faced girl in front of him didn't smell like that of a human, let alone a spirit beast. But Xuanhuan didn't dare ask too many questions. After all, this was their first time meeting, and in front of Senior Dog at that, asking too many questions would be a little rude. Has it stopped? Loopy Toad looked at the behemoth in front of it and asked about the situation. Yes, Senior Dog. This space fissure formed not long ago, and I only noticed it when I was about to mend it. Originally he wanted to block the crack, and then this ferocious creature would come out from inside. It was the same as when I went to Demon Saint's holy palace last time. There was a fishing line in this creature's belly, and I cut it off with my life-bonded magic weapon, Red Moon Blade Disc, Immortal Xuanhuan said in full detail. As he spoke, a reddish-gold blade disc the size of a millstone slowly spun behind him. This was Loopy Toad's first time seeing Immortal Xuanhuan's life-bonded magic weapon. In fact, this millstone-sized Red Moon Blade Disc was just a miniature version, and Immortal Xuanhuan's life-bonded magic weapon could freely shrink or shrink. Is there a severed line? Little Silver was very curious. Part of it is still attached to that evil creature's body, and the rest has already been swallowed up by the space fissure. It should have been recycled. I think it's a puppet spell, but I don't think so. If it's just a simple puppet spell, it would be a little difficult to control such a behemoth. Immortal Xuanhuan cupped his chin and looked at Loopy Toad. Does Senior Dog know what spell this is? Loopy Toad pretended to be profound. Of course I know. On the side, Little Silver looked like he was watching a good show. Dog 2's act had gone overboard, and Little Silver wanted to see what it had to say. Loopy Toad, I know, but there's no need to say it in person. My servant, Little Silver, will handle this matter. Little Silver. F***ku? Teacher Little Silver, what do you think? Immortal Xuanhuan asked very cautiously and even used honorifics. Although this Miss Little Silver was indeed Senior Dog's servant, what was Senior Dog's identity? Even if Miss Little Silver was a servant, her identity wasn't something he could touch. That was because holy beasts and vicious beasts were inseparable enemies to begin with. Although Little Silver hadn't had much contact with vicious beasts, he had come into contact with them at a very young age. That was before holy beasts had gone extinct and before Dog Saint had been made into a hot pot. Everything had been pretty wonderful. Little Silver frowned as he looked at the scavenger Kuan, which seemed to have already fallen asleep. Was it a puppet spell? That shouldn't be possible. The puppet spell usually controlled targets that weren't too big. Thousands of years ago, people who had mastered this spell knew how to apply the 100 puppets demonstration technique, which meant that they could control over 100 puppets at the same time. But in the end, these puppets were very small. It would be very difficult to control such a huge vicious beast with the puppet spell alone. It's the puppet goo spell. Little Silver suddenly raised his head and said. Chapter 642. It's not the puppet spell, it's the puppet goo spell? Realization dawned on Immortal Xuanhuan's face, and his admiration for Senior Dog instantly rose again. The ground began to roll up and down like the billowing waves. In the end, this was Senior Dog. Even a servant under him could instantly see through the trick. Why hadn't he thought of it? Indeed, if it was the puppet goo spell, which was even more sinister than the puppet spell, controlling such a vicious creature would no longer be nonsense. The puppet voodoo technique was a technique that was based on the puppet voodoo technique and enhanced by the voodoo technique. Unlike the puppet spell, which used strings and spells to control puppets, the puppet goo spell required a goo to be planted in the body of the person under the spell, and the power of the goo poison combined with the strings and spells to strengthen the entire puppet spell. To control such an enormous vicious creature, the goo insect inside its body had to be terrifyingly large. Immortal Xuanhuan opened his immortal eye, and a beam of spirit light shot out to penetrate the surface of the scavenger Kuan's skin to see inside its body. But very quickly he withdrew his immortal eye. This method didn't work. Like the baby multi-fanged Kuan, this scavenger Kuan's main energy source was primordial qi. Since the primordial qi covered its body, the immortal eye, which used spirit energy as its main energy source, couldn't penetrate the Kuan's skin at all. As expected, it doesn't work. Immortal Xuanhuan sighed. The concentration of primordial qi in his body was still too low. Little Silver licked his lips. Should I cut it open and take a look? Immortal Xuanhuan suddenly felt that this Miss Little Silver was a little scary. Cut it open? How could it be so easy? He had used Red Moon Blade disc to cut the fishing line on the back of this vicious creature, and part of the disc's blade had scraped the surface of the scavenger Kuan's skin, but this seemingly soft skin was actually so hard that it couldn't be broken. His Red Moon Blade disc was a world-defying magic weapon. It wasn't a high-level world-defying magic weapon, and had just reached 8th class. However, an 8th grade world-defying celestial device, which was also his natal magic weapon, could definitely destroy the celestial body of a genuine immortal in terms of the damage it could inflict on the celestial body. However, even such a magical artifact could do nothing against this primordial vicious beast. This monster is not moving now. Let's find a way to block the crack first. Immortal Xuanhuan frowned slightly. Worried that something unforeseen might happen, he wanted to be the first to block that unusual space fissure. However, just as he was about to make a move, an extremely ferocious pressure came from the spatial rift. Senior Dog. Something else is coming out. Immortal Xuanhuan had a bad feeling in his heart. Loopy Toad and Little Silver were on guard at the same time. Because of the protective golden light around them, this pressure had a limited effect on them. But just by looking at the momentum, they knew that this fissure was probably going to spit out something incredible again. The baby multi-fanged Kuan in the Demon Saint's holy palace, and the scavenger Kuan in front of him, what would it be this time? At this moment, a strand of tension lingered in the surroundings. It's a big guy this time. Little Silver sked. Although the monster in the crack hadn't come out yet, he could already sense that it wasn't simple. This kind of pressure probably didn't belong to an adult prehistoric vicious beast. Let's try this hammer, Loopy Toad reminded them at that moment. They weren't flustered at all. After all, with the hammer that little Masterling had just personally forged in front of them, if they really ran into an opponent they couldn't handle, they could settle it with one blow. It was impossible to make a move. How could they beat this kind of monster? As Little Silver had guessed, it was a big guy this time. The space fissure tore open visibly and became wider than before. Then, a scavenger Kuan that reeked of decay and was even bigger than the child scavenger Kuan in front of them flew out of the fissure. This scavenger Kuan was more than 10 times the size of the one on the ground. It flew out of the fissure like an aircraft carrier, and its huge shadow directly covered Loopy Toad's astonished face. Furthermore, this was just the upper half of its body, the other half was still in the space fissure. This thing was way too big. Immortal Xuanhuan was greatly alarmed. It really is an adult scavenger Kuan? But this size means that it has just reached adulthood. A real adult scavenger Kuan is even bigger. Little Silver's expression was as calm as an ancient well. Although this vicious beast was big, it didn't scare him at all. Back then, Dog Saint's double sizing had been even bigger. If it wasn't for those cultivators carelessly drugging Dog Saint, making him unable to use double sizing and turning him into a spicy hot pot stew, the Holy Dog clan wouldn't have been completely wiped out. Immortal Xuanhuan, Loopy Toad and Little Silver scattered on the spot and retreated a little. To their surprise, this adult scavenger Kuan didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. Instead, it directly opened its mouth wide and made a swallowing motion at the child scavenger Kuan on the ground. It looks like the angler wants to use this adult scavenger Kuan to swallow the child scavenger Kuan on the ground and take it back. Immortal Xuanhuan figured out the intention of the person behind the scenes. Since that's the case, we can't let him succeed, Loopy Toad said with a frown. The angler's action of choosing to take it back rather than attack was enough to prove that there was a secret inside the child scavenger Kuan on the ground that the angler didn't want them to know. As for what secret this child scavenger Kuan was hiding, they would only find out after it was cut open. Senior, don't do anything, leave it to me. After saying that, Immortal Xuanhuan was the first to rush forward. Loopy Toad, all right. Red Moon Blade Disc's attack had already been quite weak against the child scavenger Kuan, and it was clear that it was almost impossible to cause any damage to this adult scavenger Kuan. All of his hopes rested on that little hammer. Immortal Xuanhuan gripped the hammer tightly. He had never seen this hammer before and it didn't look very impressive. But since this hammer had been made by Senior Dog, it should be effective, right? While Immortal Xuanhuan was thinking this, he raised the pitch-black hammer and directly swung it down at the adult scavenger Xuan. Bang! There was the muffled sound of a collision. Immortal Xuanhuan was thrown back, but he wasn't injured. The moment he was thrown back, the adult scavenger Xuan which had been hit by the hammer suddenly roared in pain, and its swallowing motion instantly froze. The weakening effect had taken effect. Now is the time for all living things to be equal. Hurry up and attack. Dog 2 reminded him. Alright, Senior. Immortal Xuanhuan grit his teeth and operated Red Moon Blade Disc again. Chapter 643. Red Moon Blade Disc was like a gear, and as Immortal Xuanhuan cast the spell, it grew in size as it moved, its blade piercing through the heavens. When a world-defying magic weapon truly unleashed its power, it undoubtedly had earth-shattering destructive power. Red Moon Blade Disc cut into the weakened body of the adult scavenger Xuan inch by inch, causing massive amounts of blood to gush out of the wound. The corrosive blood flowed out very slowly like magma, and the moment it touched the ground, it corroded into the earth and burned up thick smoke. Loopy Toad and Little Silver sealed their nose orifices. The smell was too horrible, and if they didn't cut off their sense of smell they would probably die here. It really works. Immortal Xuanhuan was delighted in his heart. This hammer was too useful. In the end, it was Senior Dog who could actually create such a powerful limited-use magic weapon. It could only be used 10 times in total, so he had to use it sparingly. The adult scavenger Xuan let out a pained cry, and the mysterious angler on the other end of the crack seemed to sense something. Under the angler's control, the upper body of the adult scavenger Xuan which had just poked out of the crack actually started to shrink back. Wanna leave? Not so easy. Xuanhuan grit his teeth and operated Red Moon Blade Disc with all his might. In a flash, the disc expanded by several hundred inches and directly cut off the upper body of the adult scavenger Xuan along with the fishing line on it. Mend. The moment the scavenger Xuan's body fell, Immortal Xuanhuan directly used the Heart Demon Stone as an energy source to directly extract primordial chi from it and used the Skyman Stone to plug the crack. The Skyman Stone was a synthetic cultivation industrial material used to repair space cracks. It was very expensive, but it was very effective in mending space. But the moment Loopy Toad saw Immortal Xuanhuan take out the Skyman Stone, its heart was still shaken. This Skyman Stone could probably buy 5 houses in Jianghu. When all was said and done, this was a legendary cultivation big shot. Loopy Toad had simply been caught off guard when he took out such an expensive stone. After mending the abnormal space crack, Immortal Xuanhuan breathed a sigh of relief. Previously, he had wanted to conserve the vital energy stored in the demonic heart stone and use his spiritual power to activate the divine mending stone to repair it. Although he could successfully repair it, it was rather time-consuming. Now that it used the origin true chi as its main energy source, the heaven mending stone actually blocked the crack in space in an instant. Xuanhuan hadn't noticed it before because he hadn't had a comparison. Now that he did, he realized that the gap between spirit energy and primordial chi was indeed a little big. Immortal Xuanhuan looked at the half of the adult scavenger Xuan's corpse. Just as he was about to lean over to take a look, this half of the body actually directly turned into a puddle of rotten mud on the spot, corroding a huge hole in the ground. Not dead. Immortal Xuanhuan frowned. This is a primordial vicious beast, how can it die so easily? Little Silver said from the side. The difference between holy beasts and ferocious beasts was like the two extremes of yang and yin. Holy beasts focused on intelligence while ferocious beasts focused on strength. However, if they both developed to the later stages, the strength of the two would actually be about the same. The only difference in the early stages would be the direction of the growth of their attribute points. Thus, ferocious beasts had extremely strong regenerative abilities. Even if half of their bodies were cut off, they could still survive as long as their core wasn't damaged. It was even more difficult to find the core in such a huge ferocious beast. A ferocious beast's core was very small, like a grain of millet. In a normal situation, it would already be very difficult for someone to fight a ferocious beast for the first time, and they wouldn't be able to care about looking for the core at all. Little Silver stared at the puddle of rotten flesh in front of him and sighed in his heart. If it was Master, killing such a ferocious beast should be as easy as turning over his hand, right? Little Silver couldn't help recalling the first time he had fought Master. At that time, Master had still been wearing a sports coat, and he had very handsomely raised his hand to slap Little Silver in his beast form and sent Little Silver flying with one slap. At that time, Little Silver vividly remembered how he had felt. He hadn't felt angry, nor had he felt the slightest bit of pain. Instead, after being slapped, he had felt a sense of excitement, as if he had indulged in a powerful oppressive force. Now that Little Silver thought about it carefully, perhaps from that time on, he had already believed from the bottom of his heart that Wang Ling was his master. Thinking this, Little Silver still felt a little regretful in his heart. Who knew when Master would be able to hit him again? The adult scavenger Kuan fled, leaving behind this child scavenger Kuan that had already broken free of control. The child scavenger Kuan itself wasn't aggressive unless there was someone controlling it from behind. Now, the fishing line on this scavenger Kuan had already been cut, and it lay motionless on the ground. The 3-view shattering hammer's weakening ability was a group attack that could forcibly weaken any hostile enemy. While this weakened state hadn't completely disappeared, Immortal Xuanhuan continued to use Red Moon Blade Disc, intending to cut open this scavenger Kuan's body layer by layer to see what on earth was inside. Since he couldn't find the core, he just had to continue to cause damage to this scavenger Kuan. Furthermore, the recovery ability of a child scavenger Kuan wasn't as good as that of an adult scavenger Kuan. In this weakened state of all creatures are equal, Immortal Xuanhuan felt that everything was now completely under his control. Let me see what on earth is inside this vicious creature of yours. Immortal Xuanhuan's eyebrows furrowed into a small knot. Then he carefully manipulated Red Moon Blade Disc to make precise cuts. The scavenger Kuan roared in pain and tried to flee, but Immortal Xuanhuan raised his hand and nailed it to the ground with a golden light. Loopy Toad's heart shook as it sighed at how amazing little Master Ling's little hammer was. This kind of weakening was just too sick. In this weakened state, whether it was a child scavenger Kuan or an adult scavenger Kuan, neither had the ability to resist. This thing had rough skin and thick flesh, and now that Red Moon Blade Disc continued to cut it open, the first layer of skin was finally completely peeled off. Xuanhuan and Loopy Toad had thought that they would find a goo insect or something inside its body, but in the end, they were greatly astonished by what they saw. Inside this child scavenger Kuan, there was actually another scavenger Kuan wrapped up inside it. Immortal Xuanhuan, Loopy Toad, Little Silver. To refine an even smaller Kuan into a goo insect, and then use the puppet goo spell to attach the goo insect to another Kuan? What kind of operation was this? Senior Dog, let me try again. Xuanhuan was a little dumbfounded, and then continued to operate the blade disc to remove the second layer of skin of this Kuan, although it was a little hard to believe they had indeed seen it. Inside this second Kuan hidden inside the body there was actually a third Kuan. Chapter 644. There were 3 baby Kuan inside this child Kuan's body, each smaller than the last. Little Silver couldn't help recalling a web game he had played called Big Fish Eats Small Fish. Refining an even smaller Kuan into a goo worm, and then using the puppet goo spell to plant the goo worm inside the smaller Kuan to parasitize it. Immortal Xuanhuan came up with a guess. Little Silver thought for a bit, then cupped his chin and narrowed his eyes as he said softly, "That should be the case, but this angler also used a characteristic of a vicious beast like a Kuan." "What characteristic?" Immortal Xuanhuan asked in a low voice. "Have you ever played the Big Fish Eats Small Fish game?" Little Silver explained, "When a vicious beast like a Kuan is in danger, it has a unique way of strengthening itself, and that is to devour smaller Kuan to strengthen itself. This is my first time seeing this, but my grandfather mentioned it to me when I was in the clan, so it definitely isn't fake." Hearing this, Immortal Xuanhuan and Loopy Toad both understood. Planting a goo worm inside an adult Kuan was obviously as difficult as ascending to heaven, but it was very easy to plant it in a baby Kuan that had just been born and wasn't too big. Coupled with the Kuan's characteristic of the big swallowing the small to strengthen itself, controlling a baby Kuan with a goo worm was the same as controlling an even more powerful adult Kuan. Immortal Xuanhuan couldn't help recalling the half of an adult Kuan that he had cut open with Red Moon Blade Disc. Although it had looked like a bloody mess, now that he thought about it carefully when he had cut it open, the cross-section had been like a 1,000-layer cake. Immortal Xuanhuan had never dealt with a vicious beast before, and had thought that this was the structure of a Kuan's body. Now that he thought about it, the adult Kuan that had survived after Immortal Xuanhuan had cut off half of its body had probably swallowed several smaller Kuan. However, this was not the most frightening part of the story. It was actually the angler. To be able to make a prehistoric vicious beast like a Kuan feel threatened, and use the big swallowing the small stress response to force itself to strengthen itself. What realm was this angler's expert realm? Immortal Xuanhuan shivered. He was very glad that he had met Senior Dog. Otherwise his encounter with a vicious beast on Drought Star this time might have ended tragically. The little hammer that Senior Dog gave him, he had to use it carefully. Immortal Xuanhuan sighed in his heart. This magical little hammer was a genuine life-saving magic treasure. Furthermore, it was all thanks to Senior Dog's divination that he would be in trouble this time and had specially sent Little Hammer over. Otherwise, the consequences would have been really hard to predict. So even though Immortal Xuanhuan was a little afraid of this mysterious unknown person, he felt inexplicably at ease when he thought about how he still had Senior Dog behind him. Since Senior Dog was able to create this magical hammer to counter, it meant that Senior Dog's strength might be on par with that mysterious angler's. The most troublesome thing right now was that they didn't know what the intentions of the mysterious angler were, nor did they know where he was. The only thing they knew was that it wouldn't be easy for the mysterious angler to tear open the spatial wall and let the Xuan fly over. That was because every time a special spatial crack was formed, it would be a true disaster if it was formed on a large scale. All in all, Immortal Xuanhuan felt that this situation where they were out in the open and the enemy in the dark was actually very disadvantageous to them. The situation could be said to be a blur, and there was next to no information on the angler. But now, it wasn't that they didn't have any clues. Immortal Xuanhuan stared at the already imprisoned baby Xuan on the ground, and an idea stirred in his heart. "Senior Dog, do you want to cut it down again?" Immortal Xuanhuan asked. What was in front of them now was the second baby Xuan that this child Xuan had swallowed. "Keep cutting," Dog 2 said in a low voice. Actually, it was also very curious about how many more layers there were inside. "Very well, Senior," Immortal Xuanhuan replied very politely. He concentrated on manipulating Red Moon Blade Disc and adjusting its size. The young Xuan inside were now getting smaller and smaller, so he had to be extra careful when cutting them. If the baby Xuan in the innermost layer really did contain a goo insect, then he would have to be even more cautious. The origin of the goo worm could be one of the important clues that could control the mysterious angler at present. Because there weren't many cultivators who knew how to use goo to begin with, and among this small group of cultivators, there was actually someone who knew how to use a powerful goo to control a primordial vicious beast. The number of people who were on the list in history could be counted on one's fingers. In fact, there was another clue. It was Little Silver's Holy Beast blood tracking spell. When the mysterious angler had retrieved the adult Xuan earlier, Little Silver had already left a few drops of his own blood on the Xuan. If this adult Xuan could finally return to the angler's side smoothly, Little Silver would be able to use the tracking spell to determine the angler's approximate location. It was just that this was a private mission that Little Master Ling had assigned them, so Dog 2 and Little Silver kept it to themselves and didn't directly say it out loud. "I'm going to cut it." At that moment, Immortal Xuanhuan felt like a surgeon in an operating theater who was about to operate on a patient, and he was especially nervous. But at the same time, there was a faint sense of excitement, as if he were about to open an express delivery. Hovering in the air, Immortal Xuanhuan slowly lowered the Red Moon Blade Disc and started to cut open the skin of the second baby Xuan in his body. This scene gave off a chainsaw, déjà vu. Little Silver had finished watching this movie not long ago, and for some reason he felt that it was very tasty. Seeing this, Little Silver rubbed his belly. It was a pity that he had been on a diet recently, so he rarely ordered takeout. He planned to eat broccoli with grenade-throwing Senior Immortal for a while. But looking at this scene in front of him, he suddenly wanted to eat Midnight Dining Hall's red braised food. Boss Tan Siming and grenade-throwing Senior Immortal were friends, and each time grenade-throwing Senior Immortal placed an order, Tan Siming would give grenade-throwing Senior Immortal discounts and red packets. He was a very enthusiastic boss. Red Moon Blade Disc spun, and as blood gushed out of the second baby Xuan, the surface of its skin was cut open perfectly. This cut was perfect and didn't touch the baby Xuan's internal organs. Dog 2 and Little Silver stepped forward to take a look, and the scene in front of them was beyond their expectations. Because what was inside this baby Xuan wasn't a Xuan. It was a living person. Chapter 645. A Xuan's stomach was big enough to begin with, and even a baby Xuan could swallow a wanxiang. Once its stomach was cut open, it wouldn't be strange for any kind of creature to spill out. But the girl in front of them wasn't in the Xuan's stomach, but was lying quietly on it like a curled-up baby, hugging its knees as it slept. This was a girl with long blue hair. Half of her face was covered by her hair, but it couldn't hide her beauty. Unexpectedly, the girl was actually very clean from head to toe. Even her face was the same, without the slightest trace of blood. They were all repelled by a layer of dim blue light, and this light came from the simple and crude gray ancient clothes she was wearing. This was an extremely corrosive scavenger Xuan, and every part of its body had a strong corrosive nature. The reason why this girl could lie here so peacefully was all thanks to the protection of the magic light emitted by the gray ancient clothes. What's this girl's background? Immortal Xuanhuan was stupefied. He had never expected to actually dig out a girl from inside a xuan. And a beautiful girl at that. What should we do, senior dog? Immortal Xuanhuan used his magic power to draw the girl out and put her steadily on the ground before using the immortal eye to conduct a detailed examination. He didn't have any other intentions. He just wanted to check if the girl was injured. This girl was indeed very beautiful, with an incomparably otherworldly beauty that didn't belong to this world, as if she didn't belong to the common populace. In some sense, Loopy Toad felt that this girl's temperament was very similar to Little Master Ling's. How is it? Do you want me to feed her holy beast blood? Little Silver asked on the side, his hands on his knees. Not for now. This girl's vital signs are stable. She's just in a coma for some unknown reason. Immortal Xuanhuan cupped his chin in his hand as he answered. He then raised his head and gave Little Silver a very strange look. Only then did he realize Little Silver's identity with amazement. Miss Little Silver, so you're a holy beast? You just realized. Little Silver sighed in his heart. He felt that this legendary cultivator really wasn't much. He actually only realized it now. Immortal Xuanhuan smiled foolishly. Miss Little Silver, don't take offense, I've always been slow on the uptake. I felt that Miss Little Silver's aura was a little strange. It didn't feel like a spirit beast, demon beast, or magical beast, let alone a human. I completely overlooked a holy beast. I've always wondered if Miss Little Silver was an alien. Little Silver, X. Alien. Although this answer sounded a little heart-wrenching, Little Silver had to admit that after the extinction of holy beasts, most human cultivators' memories of them had begun to fade. There were only two major historical effects of the extinction of holy beasts. The first was the establishment of an annual Spirit Beast Protection Day, and the other effect was to stimulate the local dog meat hot pot culture. This was all thanks to the dog saint. However, the dog meat used in the dog hot pot culture in those regions was provided through legal channels, and the type of dog used was a type of meat dog that was specially eaten, similar to the dragon pork that Jianghu often used to fry pork chops for Wang Ming. To be honest, Little Silver really wanted to eat it when he was free. Because it was said that the base for the dog meat hot pot in that region was an exclusive secret recipe based on what Dog Saint had been cooked back then. When he had watched Dog Saint being cooked back then, Little Silver remembered curling up in the dog clan's depository of Buddhist texts with an incomparably terrified expression on his face and an uncontrollable drool. To this day he still couldn't forget the aroma of the spicy hot pot. We'll take this girl back first, I'll leave the rest to you. Loopy Toad stared at the sleeping girl for a long time before it finally made a decision. Because judging from the style of the gray ancient clothes she was wearing, it could tell that she wasn't an ordinary person. Leaving her here wouldn't be of any use. It would be better to take her back first and see if Little Master Ling had any way to wake her up. Alright, senior dog, don't worry, leave this to me. I've already taken control of this vicious creature. I'll find its core later and get rid of it once and for all. Immortal Xuanhuan patted his chest and laughed. All right. Loopy Toad nodded. If the hammer is about to run out of energy, you can directly summon me with your immortal talisman and I'll come over to recharge it. Although a limited-use magic weapon could only be used a limited number of times, it could be used continuously as long as it didn't run out of energy and was recharged in time. Thank you, senior dog. Immortal Xuanhuan nodded. Of course he knew what was at stake. This was also one of the main reasons why Immortal Xuanhuan wanted to do everything possible to save on using the hammer. Then Dog 2 put its paw lightly on the girl's shoulder, and it and Little Silver stamped their feet, followed by a flash of golden light. Two people and one dog reappeared in front of Lord Ma. Wang Ling already knew about the situation with the girl in gray. In fact, the moment Immortal Xuanhuan had cut open the vicious beast and rescued the girl in gray from its belly, he had already texted Immortal Toya. There had to be a reason why she was in a coma. Furthermore, the girl's background was unknown, so Wang Ling didn't want to directly wake her up in his own home. He didn't know this girl at all. Since her vital signs were stable and she had just fallen into an inexplicable coma, Wang Ling felt that the only thing he could do was send her to the hospital in time. He wasn't a hero, so he didn't need to show off by saving a damsel in distress. What was more, he still had to worry about the Beast King's remains, summer camp in 2 days. After the summer camp there was still the final exam. What wasn't more important than this? Thus, when Dog 2 and Little Silver brought the girl back, all Wang Ling could do was very gentlemanly place her on his bed with attraction spell. Fortunately, she was very clean and didn't need any special purification treatment. The only thing that Wang Ling was a little curious about was the gray clothes she was wearing, because they had the aura of heavenly Tao on them. Wang Ling stretched out his hand to touch the gray clothes to see what they were made of. In the end, he had just stretched out his hand when Mother Wang directly opened the door and came in. Mother Wang sucked in a breath at the scene in front of her. The girl in gray was sleeping soundly on the bed, and Ling Ling's action of reaching out to touch the hem of the clothes? What were they doing? Mother Wang covered her mouth in astonishment. Then she slammed the door shut with a bang. Wang Ling. Chapter 646. This was already the second time. What was it like to be misunderstood by your own mother for the second time? Wang Ling felt that it was as embarrassing as someone seeing you dripping yogurt on your pants while wiping it off with a tissue in the bedroom. Looking at the bedroom door, Wang Ling felt that it was time for him to enchant it as well. At the very least, add a function for protection. It wasn't that Mother Wang didn't have the habit of knocking on the door, but that sometimes when she was in a hurry to say something, she would forget to knock. It could only be said that all mothers in the world were like this. Wang Ling looked at the girl in gray on the bed, and his eyebrows furrowed into a small knot. This was because he felt that this girl in gray had a different identity from a human cultivator. He had touched the material of this gray robe, but he couldn't tell what it was at all. In that case, there were two possibilities. First, the material of the gray robe came from outside the Milky Way, and it belonged to an alien material outside the Milky Way. Or it was an extinct resource from the primordial era. In both cases, there was only one way for Wang Ling to learn about the material, and that was to set up an array to summon the heavenly Tao for information. Was he going to deliver crispy noodle snacks again? Speaking of which, it seemed that the box of toasted gluten-flavored crispy noodle snacks which he had specially ordered was already on its way. Wang Ling frowned and sighed in his heart. Heavenly Tao. It was July 22nd on Saturday in the 13th week of the semester. It was already the next morning when Immortal Toya arrived. He had already planned to set off from Chrysanthemum Island last night. After all, it was Ling Jinren's order, and he didn't dare slight it at all. In the end, he just happened to run into his two disciples, Jin Shi and Yin Shi's extracurricular cram school seminar. Jin Shi and Yin Shi had come to the island and been taken in as disciples by Immortal Toya. After personally training them, their damaged spirit roots had already been completely repaired. During their 13 years on the island, the siblings had learned a lot of knowledge and principles from Immortal Toya, but being out of touch with the secular world for a long time was definitely not good. Jin Shi and Yin Shi were still very young, so Immortal Toya planned to help them find a cram school in the city while they were still able to absorb new things fairly quickly, so that they could interact more with the children in the city. The times were developing and technology was advancing. In this era, even the models of alchemy furnaces were advancing day by day. There were even people who used hot pots to refine pills. This was a newly developed automatic hot pot alchemy furnace which Immortal Toya had only recently seen. You just needed to plug in the electricity, mix the ingredients according to the proportion, and stew them in one pot. It was super convenient. The scariest thing was that this type of alchemy furnace was invented by a university student. Later, someone bought out the patent and became rich. It could only be said that there would always be talented people in every generation. Young people's thoughts were always novel and unique. Immortal Toya had always been very confident in Jin Shi and Yin Shi's talents. Therefore, he planned to let the two siblings go to the city to gain some experience. The times had indeed changed. Immortal Toya couldn't help feeling a little emotional. A long time ago, it was the city kids who went deep into the countryside to gain experience. Now, it was obviously not a wise choice to be out of step with the times. Children in the countryside had to think of ways to get in touch with life in the city. Chrysanthemum Island actually had a lot of advanced technology, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. Thus, Immortal Toya hadn't been able to come over right away last night because of his two precious disciples' extracurricular seminar. But he wasn't in a hurry. After all, the girl had just fallen asleep and her life wasn't in danger. Immortal Toya's ride was a wooden carriage which had a very special name, Wooden Ox. It sounded very slow, but in fact it wasn't slow at all. This carriage was specially customized with modern technology, and could also be used for three purposes. When necessary, it could turn into a machine-operated bird to fly in the sky, a machine-operated whale to act as a submarine, or a machine-operated dolphin to act as a speedboat. I'm taking you out today because I have something to do, and I'll show you around the city. Given your temperaments, you definitely won't get into fights with other people in the city, but we Chrysanthemum Island people shouldn't be bullied, understand? When it's time to fight back, you still have to fight back. Sitting on the wooden ox, Immortal Toya reminded Jin Shi and Yin Shi, who were sitting in the back as he was about to start the vehicle. Yes, Shifu. Jin Shi and Yin Shi replied in unison, but when is the time to fight back? Immortal Toya was blank. He felt that this was a very difficult matter to define, which was why he had decided to send the siblings to the city to gain experience for a period of time. It was certainly good to be a pure and kind child nowadays, but if you wanted to survive, you would definitely suffer if you were too kind. The siblings' lives had already been very bitter. Most alchemists paid attention to the tranquility of their hearts, which meant that they wouldn't get angry easily. Jin Shi and Yin Shi had been with him for many years. Although they might not have as much exposure to elixirs as the older alchemists on the market, children who had been exposed to alchemy from a young age had completely different temperaments. So, Immortal Toya's answer to the siblings' question was, if you feel angry you can fight back. Remember not to kill them and leave them alive. That way I can save them. Yes, Shifu. The siblings looked at each other and smiled. While Immortal Toya was on his way to the Wang family's small villa, Wang Ling had a video call with Taoist Guang to ask him about the gray Taoist robe the girl was wearing. Taoist Guang's live streaming business had been in full swing recently, and the average number of people online had just broken the 20 million mark, bringing huge traffic to the website. When Wang Ling had looked for Taoist Guang in the morning, Taoist Guang had just been about to start a live stream. Taoist Guang looked carefully at the photo Wang Ling had sent him, and then shook his head. To tell you the truth, Senior Ling, I'm really stupid. I can't tell the origin of this gray Taoist robe at all. Taoist Guang had really examined it very carefully, although he hadn't held out much hope from the beginning. What realm was Ling Jinren at? If he couldn't tell the origin of this Taoist robe, what could he do? He was also very desperate. Wang Ling nodded. Sure enough, in the end he could only ask the heavenly Tao. But Senior Ling, I can't tell the origin of this Taoist robe. Does Senior know the origin of this robe I'm wearing? Taoist Guang smiled slightly and then zoomed in on the video. Only then did Wang Ling see that Taoist Guang was no longer wearing that white Taoist robe, but a full-made outfit. Wang Ling, Taoist Guang scratched his grizzled hair. This is a flag I set up a while ago when the number of viewers broke 20 million. I said that as long as it broke through, I would dress in women's clothes. Later, I used the island's resources and made up this robe based on a picture online. Nowadays, audiences' tastes are really becoming stranger and stranger. What do you think, Ling Jinren? Wang Ling replied, oh no. Taoist Guang, is it the feeling of being moved? Wang Ling, the feeling of having a heart attack. Chapter 647. It could only be said that Taoist Guang was really an honest man, and had very sincerely used the resources on the island to weave a very fitting set of clothes for himself. But Wang Ling really couldn't imagine what it would be like for an old man in maid's clothes to act cute in front of a mirror during a live stream and ask, am I beautiful? It was a little too frightening and could shatter one's worldview to the same degree as a classic movie line. You just lost a leg but she lost a beautiful love. But from a live streamer's point of view, Taoist Guang was a conscientious live streamer. At the very least he hadn't reneged on his debt. It was just that Taoist Guang felt that he was going further and further down the path of live streaming, and was now on a path of no return, as he had completely forgotten about reconstructing his body. Wang Ling couldn't make a choice for Taoist Guang on this point. Everyone had the right to choose their own way of living. On the other hand, Taoist Guang now didn't have just one trick up his sleeve. As long as Taoist Guang wanted to, he could rely on selling figurines to survive the samsara spirit tribulation. When he had first started live streaming, that had just been an extravagant wish, but now it was completely achievable. It was very easy to find a group of fans among 20 million viewers who were willing to spend money on him. For example, there were still people who went to this band live streamer Baboon every day to burn incense and give gifts to him. Wang Ling didn't know what on earth these people were thinking. Wasn't it better to save money to buy crispy noodle snacks? Holding dog twos, but Little Silver sat on the edge of the bed. They had been watching over the girl in gray all night, but she showed no signs of waking up. Where on earth had she come from? Why had she appeared in the belly of a Xuan? What was her background? Why had she fallen into a deep sleep? He didn't know any of this. Little Silver couldn't help thinking of Ye Xian, the silly girl who had saved his life back then. In order to cure Ye Xian's illness, Little Silver had made a deal with Immortal Mansion to serve as the master of Immortal Mansion's gatekeeper Holy Beast for a while in exchange for Immortal Mansion's medicinal resources. Now Ye Xian was staying at Xian Jinren's place for memory rehabilitation, and she had to drink Immortal Toya's brain-strengthening medicine every day, but until now there had been no results. When little Silver had gone to see Xian before, she had even forgotten his name. It wasn't that Immortal Toya's medicine wasn't effective, but that Xian's amnesia was so severe that it was almost like the memory of a fish. Little Silver had heard that Immortal Toya had increased the dosage recently, and didn't know if Xian was better. In Little Silver's view, Art Courtyard and this girl in gray had similar backgrounds. They were both unregistered residents. That, Toya's that said Amwai Sheep's eyes were glued to the scene. This was Sheep's first time seeing such a mechanical vehicle. One Sidhat said that Wang of said Wang, said, de. Sheep. Said, Yaibi said sheep. Wang. It had been less than a month since he had last returned to the Wang family's small villa, but for some reason, Immortal Toya felt like a lifetime had passed since he came here again. He had already heard the noise in his bedroom. Standing at the window, he saw Immortal Toya standing at the door with his two disciples, who seemed to be saying something. Jianghu and Yianxia followed closely behind him. Shifu, what's going on here? Didn't I tell you before? There's a great senior who lives here. Jianghu and Yianxia nodded. Yes, is it the senior who eats crispy noodle snacks? The two siblings spoke at the same time, and even their tones were exactly the same. Sheep was amazed by this scene. Immortal Toya, yes, that's him. It's not just this great senior, everyone in this villa is a senior. You have to be polite, understand? Jianghu and Yianxia lowered their heads and thought at the same time, then looked up at the same time. Then Shifu, can you beat this great senior? The corner of Immortal Toya's mouth twitched at this question. Of course he knew that even if there were 100 or 1,000 of him, there was no way he could beat Ling Jinren. But the problem was that he regarded Jianghu and Yianxia as his own disciples. As their Shifu, how could he admit that he wasn't as good as someone else? However, Immortal Toya didn't dare directly pat his chest and say that he was very strong. He didn't even dare say that the chances of him winning were 50-50. He could brag about it in private, but the problem was that he was at Senior Ling's doorstep. Looking around out of the corner of his eye, Immortal Toya saw a figure staring at him from the second floor. That should be Senior Ling, right? Yes, it had to be Senior Ling. He didn't even need to sense his aura to know. Because Senior Ling's habit had always been to peek and observe in secret. To be honest, Wang Ling's figure at the bedroom window on the second floor gave Immortal Toya a great deal of pressure at that moment. Well, can we discuss this when we get back to the island? Is this a taboo question? Or is Shifu actually very weak? Jianghu and Yianxia opened their mouths again. Immortal Toya dropped his forehead deeply into his hand, feeling like his dick was hurting. If he had known earlier, he would have chosen to have Jianghu and Yianxia stay in the car. Initially, he had thought that since Jianghu and Yianxia had come to the city with great difficulty, he might as well bring them to Ling Jinren and familiarize himself with them. But who would have thought, these two little bastards would start to undermine him. When all was said and done, they were country kids who had just come to the city, and had a lot of questions to ask. He should have bought Jianghu and Yianxia a set of 100,000 Ys each before coming. The current situation could be said to be a dilemma. Immortal Toya didn't want to lose face in front of his disciples, but he also didn't want to offend Ling Jinren in front of him. Then, at this critical moment, Immortal Toya had a bright idea. He immediately took out his phone and quickly typed out a text message. Wang Ling withdrew his gaze and sure enough, he saw that his message had arrived. Immortal Toya, Senior Ling, help. Senior Ling. Wang Ling, Immortal Toya, Senior Ling, please let me brag. Wang Ling, seeming to realize that the previous text message was a little ambiguous, Immortal Toya hurriedly typed again. Please let me brag, Wang Ling, Immortal Toya, I'll give you a crispy noodle snack branch. Chapter 650. After the medicine was dripped, Immortal Toya quietly waited for the test results. There was a Lingqing acupoint on the chest, which was the place with the densest spirit qi on the surface of a cultivator's body. Therefore, the test medicine had to be dripped on the chest, and the results would usually come out within 5 minutes. If this girl in gray was really in a coma because of the poison, the results would be very obvious. But after 5 minutes, there was no reaction from the spot where the medicine had been dripped. Did it fail? Little Silver tilted his head. No, it's already succeeded. It's just that this girl is a little special. The qi produced by the medicine is actually transparent. Immortal Toya's expression changed to one of slight amazement. He had never seen this phenomenon before, but Immortal Toya clearly remembered that in his family's ancient ancestral texts, there was indeed a possibility that the potion might become transparent, but he had memorized it when he was very young. In addition, there had never been a situation where the potion had become transparent in the last 1,000 years, so Immortal Toya had forgotten that explanation a little, and would need to review it before he would know. There's no other way, I can only take this girl back to my place first, Senior Ling, Immortal Toya sighed. Although Immortal Toya had already anticipated from the beginning that this girl of unknown origin might be in a very troublesome coma, he never thought that he might have to face an illness that he had never encountered in his many years as a doctor. After that, Immortal Toya used the guide spell to guide the girl downstairs. He carefully placed her in the front passenger seat and fastened her seat belt. Once they arrived on Chrysanthemum Island, the girl in gray would have to face a thorough examination both inside and out. Of course, Immortal Toya couldn't do it alone. He understood the principle that men and women shouldn't touch. He would need the cooperation of Cailian Jinren, who had some medical expertise. Immortal Toya directly called Cailian Jinren. Hello, Cailian Jinren? I've just received a female patient from Senior Ling's family, and she's now in a deep coma. Immortal Toya gave her a rough account of his initial diagnosis. Cailian Jinren, I know. It just so happens that the rehabilitation medicine you prescribed for Yashen last time is about to run out. How about I bring her to stay on the island for a while? It just so happens that I can help you. Immortal Toya nodded. That would be great, Cailian Jinren. Thank you so much. Cailian Jinren said, What are you talking about? Senior Ling's business is our business. In fact, the people in the chat group already knew about the girl's background. Because of her mysterious identity, and the fact that the gray-clothed girl seemed to be wearing something special, the group of people were very curious about her identity. However, it was a pity that no one was able to find out the girl's identity. They couldn't even figure out the origin of the ancient robe she was wearing. By the way, do you have a photo of this lady? Cailian Jinren asked. Yes. Taoist Master, please wait a moment. I will take a photo for you. Immortal Toya put down his phone, then turned on the beauty camera and took a picture of the girl's sleeping face leaning against the passenger seat at a 45-degree angle. Jinren, here's the photo. When he sent the photo, Immortal Toya couldn't help muttering to himself that this girl was beautiful. On the other side, Cailian Jinren was silent for a moment when she saw the photo. Little Silver had mentioned in the group that this was a very beautiful girl, so Cailian Jinren had always wanted to see how beautiful she was. It was indeed very beautiful. But, Cailian Jinren, she's not bad, but there are some places where she's lacking. Immortal Toya, Jinren, what do you mean? Cailian Jinren ran her fingers through her hair. Immortal, do you know the difference between the Mariana Trench and the plains? Immortal Toya, at noon, the Wang family's small villa had an extra pair of bowls and chopsticks, which had been specially prepared for Little Silver. Mother Wang had always liked Little Silver very much from the moment they met. Although she herself wasn't particularly fond of looking at a person's face, it was undeniable that good looks indeed added points. Why haven't I seen old Senior Wang lately? Little Silver sat upright at the dining table. Because Wang Ling was sitting opposite him, he was especially well behaved with his hands on his thighs, looking very obedient. Grandpa has been cultivating in seclusion recently, Loopy Toad answered mysteriously. Grandfather Wang and the head of Kitchen Knife sect were quickly approaching the time limit for their battle. Grandfather Wang had pretty much finished studying the recipes in the past few weeks, and he heard that he had been practicing his knife skills recently at the Chrysanthemum restaurant, where he used to work. In the last few days, Grandfather Wang had been going out before dawn every day in order to improve his knife skills. Loopy Toad stood guard at the door and immediately knew what was going on. Wang Ling nodded. Although he had been busy with the midterm exams and was about to be tossed about by the summer camp, he had always been concerned about his grandfather. His grandfather had never once thought of cooling down his passion for cooking, even though he had reached an advanced age. Come to think of it, Wang Ling remembered that when Grandfather Wang was young, he had been a famous chef at Kikaro restaurant. No one could match his self-created cloak knife technique, and he had won various awards all over the country for his exquisite knife skills. Now these medals were locked in the old man's house in the countryside. Wang Ling remembered going to see it once when he was very young. It was filled with medals, trophies and certificates, and they were all genuine immortal gold. When he was young, Wang Ling remembered that someone had persuaded the old man to sell his medals and buy a house in the city. Given the capital he had accumulated when he was young, he could have casually sold one of his medals for a down payment on a house in downtown Shanghai City, but he couldn't do that now, of course. Among all the achievements the old man had made, The most impressive had to be when he had participated in the first international knife nurturing competition, at the age of 30. He had once again won an international award with his cloak knife technique, and had even been given a title. As for what the title was, Wang Ling couldn't remember. It was a story he had heard when he was young. Wang Ling turned to look at Mother Wang telepathically with a puzzled expression. Mother Wang said as she arranged the tableware, "You don't remember? When your grandfather participated in the first international knife nurturing competition, he directly won the championship with his knife technique, and was given the title, Clear Sky Knife Luo." Wang Ling nodded. "Right. That's it. Clear Sky Knife Luo." Chapter 651. Clear Sky Knife Luo. Little Silver felt like he had heard this title somewhere before. It was very familiar. Because Grandfather Wang had been busy improving his knife skills in the last few days, Mother Wang was now in charge of the Wang family's 3 meals a day. Since she had stopped writing and become a housewife, she had actually mastered a lot of life skills. Apart from taking care of family life, she didn't idle around, and used all her time to take all kinds of qualification exams. Tonight, Mother Wang was very particular about the side dishes, and had carefully planned out the meat and vegetable pairings. The starter dish was a crystal radish, which was an imported ingredient and very expensive. But it just so happened that they were on sale today, so Mother Wang bought 2 of them. She stored one in reserve, and sliced the other and stir-fried it with shredded meat. Mother Wang named this dish, Stir-Fried Radish King. The meat dish was vegetable meatballs, also known as vegetarian lion's head, which were made from minced broccoli and diced meat mixed with a certain proportion of eggs and flour. Actually, the main ingredient for this dish wasn't broccoli, but the Wang family now had so much broccoli that they couldn't digest it. So every time Mother Wang went out, she would bring several bags of broccoli with her to give away. Although the vegetable dish had been replaced with broccoli, which caused the original lion's head to lose its elasticity, that didn't stop Wang Ling from liking it very much. But because it was more troublesome to prepare, Mother Wang generally only cooked it when there were guests. This just happened to show that she really liked Little Silver. Oh, that was right, Mother Wang had named this dish, Vegetarian Lion's Head. Of the remaining 2 dishes, one was Wang Ming's favorite star grouper, but unfortunately he wasn't here today. The other dish was the soup for the evening, mushroom soup. It was made with a type of imported sea bacteria and Sarracenia bacteria, which were very good for intestinal health. Miss Silver is so thin, eat more. If it's not enough, there's more in the pot. Mother Wang smiled at Little Silver as she scooped rice into her bowl. He lowered his head shyly. "It's enough. I actually don't eat much." Wang Ling and Loopy Toad gave him disdainful looks. "I've never seen such a shameless Silver." Little Silver picked up his bowl and chopsticks, and only when he saw Wang Ling pick up food did he dare move. "Then where's Senior Wang? Master's father?" Little Silver remembered that he had only been to the Wang family's small villa a few times, and had very few opportunities to meet him. "He's busy composing. Let's eat first. He's always been like this." Mother Wang smiled helplessly. "I'll send food up later." Looking at the second floor, Little Silver couldn't hold back his chatterbox. "What book did Senior Wang write?" "I can see. The live streaming Life of the Immortal King is serialized online, and the previous one was called Let Go of That Wet Nurse," Loopy Toad replied. "You can find it online, but remember to subscribe to the original version." "Of course." Little Silver replied solemnly. Little Silver silently memorized the names of these 2 books. These were Senior Wang's masterpieces. He definitely had to read them. Not only did he have to look, but he also had to jot down the key points in his notebook. Little Silver suddenly remembered that when he was at Grenade Throwing's house, he would see Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal reading a novel when he had nothing to do, and studying it as he read it. Little Silver now completely understood. It turned out that he was reading Senior Wang's novel. Master was already so awesome, then how strong was Senior Wang? There had to be something in this novel. In the evening, it was Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal who had specially come to the Wang family's small villa to pick up Little Silver. Because he was afraid that Little Silver would be arrested and taken to the police station if he went home alone, it could be said that Grenade Throwing had gone to great lengths. On the way home, Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal saw that Little Silver actually wasn't watching TV or online soap operas, but was instead reading an e-book very seriously, and he was startled on the spot. "What are you reading? So serious?" "Senior Wang's masterpiece. You've been reading it the whole time, right? If you have any notes, can I borrow them to copy?" Little Silver looked at Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal. Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal broke out in a sweat. "I don't have any notes. It's just some of my own speculations." Senior Wang's book is a little profound, and I haven't fully grasped it yet. If you're interested, we can study it together. For grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, this would definitely be difficult. Tens of millions of people chased after Senior Wang's novels. Just a casual call to the monthly votes list would result in an overwhelming victory. So many people were reading it, but how many of them could truly comprehend it? Until now, it was likely that no one had managed to decipher anything from the novels, so it definitely wouldn't be that easy for people to comprehend. The so-called Heavenly Tao's profound mysteries still needed to be carefully examined. In the past, it might take more than 100 years of continuous research to decipher the profound meaning of a spell scroll. Senior Wang's new book had only been serialized for a few months now. How could it be so easy to comprehend it? Little Silver thought for a bit and frowned. Grenade throwing, I think we're still missing a step? That's why we can't comprehend what Senior Wang wrote. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal thought this was a little interesting. For example? I think we're still lacking practice. Little Silver closed his phone. Although he had only read the opening chapter of the novel, he was already beyond excited and had a strong urge to write. Little Silver had been wondering before whether there was any way he could earn money at home without going out. Little Silver had looked online for a long time, but most of the job listings for part-time typists online were actually scammers. After living at grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's place for so long, Little Silver felt that he should also learn to be self-reliant. And just now, Little Silver felt that Senior Wang had given him a lot of inspiration. Grenade-throwing. Little Silver stared at grenade-throwing Senior Immortal with a serious expression on his face. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal? Little Silver, I want to write a novel. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. That night, Little Silver already couldn't hold back his desire to write, and he quickly wrote the opening chapter according to the novel's format. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sat next to Little Silver and waited, wanting to see what on earth this guy could come up with. Little Silver, grenade-throwing, what do you think of this opening chapter? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, what's the theme? Little Silver was full of confidence. It's a story based on Senior Wang's image as a writer, and tells the story of a great godly writer who, after falling into desolation, makes a comeback. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal glanced at the screen. Little Silver's novel opened like this. Average subscriptions, 30. The youngster's face was expressionless as he gazed at the number of favorites displayed in the background. There was a hint of a self-deprecating sneer on his lips, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his slightly sharp fingernails dug into his palms. Wang Situ, average subscriptions 30, flop author 3rd Dan. In the authors group, and looked at the background data and announced it in an indifferent tone. As soon as the words came out, there was no surprise that it caused a stir in the group. Average subscriptions 30? As I expected, this trash author is a flop. This good-for-nothing really disgraces us authors. If it wasn't for the fact that he is his friend, this kind of good-for-nothing would have been kicked out of the website long ago. Elsewhere in the yield department, the sighed deeply after announcing the news. Next to him, the patted him on the shoulder. 2 years ago, he still had an average subscriptions of 5,000. 2 years. Instead of advancing, he's regressing. If this goes on, he's going to drop out of flop author 3rd Dan. Little Silver, what do you think? Chapter 652. It was July 23rd on Sunday in the 13th week of the semester. It was still the office on the top floor of that high-class office building in the heart of the city. In the lady of the castle's office, the tall and sturdy lord of the castle, who was dressed in a black robe and had a full beard, had unexpectedly arrived in the morning. They were about to receive the most important guest of Immortal Castle, so they had to show the highest hospitality, a cup of milk powder made from 800-year-old spirit rhinoceros milk, plus 2 pieces of rock candy. Seeing that it was almost time for the appointment, the lady of the castle started to brew the milk powder. This 800-year-old spirit rhinoceros milk powder was the lord's prized collection, and there were only 2 cans in total. The lord of the castle had one in his house, and the other was stored in the lady of the castle's office, so that he could drink it when he received important guests and when he came in person. My lord, is President Bai looking for us this time because the information we provided last time was wrong? Is he blaming us? The lady of the castle looked a little flustered. Previously, President Bai had been anxious to find that green-furred dog and its owner for revenge. They had provided the green-furred dog's coordinates, and he had sent Mr. Liu to test it out. In the end, it had been a silver-haired young man. Our information has always been accurate and it's impossible for us to be wrong. It's precisely because of this that President Bai is looking for us again this time. Sitting in his boss's chair, the lord of the castle interlocked his fingers and cupped his chin as he said, "As for last time, my venerable self doesn't think our information was wrong, but that the other party was on guard and tampered with it in advance." What do you mean? The lady of the castle was puzzled. "This subordinate is slow-witted, please explain, my lord." The lord of the castle's expression darkened. "Our Immortal Castle soul mark is unique and very secretive, and is an important tool for providing us with a huge amount of information. However, we can't rule out the possibility that an almighty could discover the soul mark and even transfer it without us noticing." The lady of the castle was alarmed. "My lord, are you suspecting that someone transferred the soul mark on that green-furred dog?" "I'm afraid so." The lord of the castle nodded his head. "Even so, we can still deduce two things. First, the relationship between that silver-haired young man and that green-furred dog is unusual." "My lord, you're absolutely right." The lady nodded. "We've already photographed this silver-haired young man and this green-furred dog walking together. But what is the second point that the lord is talking about?" The lord of the castle replied, "The second point is that the owner of this green-furred dog definitely isn't an ordinary person. I'm afraid he's an extremely powerful almighty. Being able to transfer our Immortal Castle's soul mark without a trace isn't something an ordinary person can do. As for whether the owner of the dog is the young man in the villa, it still needs to be verified. If he was an extremely powerful figure, the castle lord really couldn't associate such a big figure with a young man. Although the 10 generals dispatched by Immortal Castle had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of this mysterious and unfathomable youngster, whether or not the other party was the almighty who could transfer the soul mark had actually yet to be verified. From the information that the fort lord currently had, whether it was that green-furred dog, that silver-haired young man, that great death-courting senior, and even that young man called Audiobooks whom he had always called the root of all evil, none of them were simple characters. Furthermore, this Audiobooks was currently in the limelight. These characters looked complicated, but in fact they were very simple. If everything was attributed to that youngster, then it was very easy to explain. "Have you found anything on that youngster?" Thinking this, the lord of the castle frowned. Previously, they had sent out a number of intelligence agents to investigate the identity of that mysterious youngster, but the responses they had received were all pixelated. "We found a little?" The lady nodded. "This time, our intelligence agents started with the people around this youngster and were able to gather information on this family. Then, in a roundabout way, they found a very mysterious place where this youngster often goes to study." "A place to study?" The lord of the castle was blank. Logically speaking, even if this youngster wasn't the same person as that almighty, he shouldn't be too weak. But he had actually gone to study. Sure enough, did outstanding people secretly take remedial classes? "Where does this youngster study? Which sect?" The lord of the castle couldn't help drinking a mouthful of milk. He also wanted to register for a class later. "Number 60 High School," the lady answered truthfully. Then with a pft, the lord of the castle directly spat out a mouthful of milk. He was alarmed. Why was it this damn place again? Less than 10 minutes after the lord of the castle and the lady's conversation, President Bai finally showed up. This time the person next to President Bai wasn't Mr. Liu or Elder Zhuo Wu, but that sissy-looking Elder Ji Xing. When President Bai showed up, Elder Ji Xing was applying foundation to his face with a powder puff. This time, President Bai had come to ask for specific information on that youngster. When the lord of the castle learned from the lady in advance that this youngster was a student at No. 60 High School, he inexplicably felt a little nervous. In fact, there really weren't many places that the lord of the castle could call damn places. While Immortal Castle's intelligence network was outstanding because of its enormous network of spies, there were some places where the network hadn't been set up. For example, Huaxiao Alliance HQ, the family apartment where Wei Ji lived, and any place that had anything to do with the 10 founding generals were off-limits for intelligence spies. Just a while ago, the lord of the castle had wanted to list Number 60 High School as off-limits. That was because this school was too strange. It seemed that all the almighties who had been caught recently had something to do with this school. But the lord of the castle never expected that even the youngster whom they had been so painstakingly investigating for so long was actually a student at this high school. Such a valiant youngster was actually studying at a foundation establishment high school? The lord of the castle couldn't help twitching his lips as he felt like his 3 views had already been shattered. When President Bai entered, he didn't say anything as he found a sofa and sat down. The lady brought the cup of spirit rhino milk over, but the other party didn't even look at it. Have you prepared the information we asked for? Next to President Bai, that Elder Ji Xing asked. Since it's President Bai's request, we've naturally prepared it. The lord of the castle stretched out his hand, and the lady handed him the prepared information. It was a very small USB flash drive with all the information inside. But the moment he handed over the USB flash drive, the lord of the castle hesitated a little. He stared at President Bai and smiled awkwardly. That. President Bai, are you sure you won't reconsider? Chapter 653. As an intelligence organization that currently enjoyed a certain reputation in Shanghai City and even the world, Immortal Castle had been able to establish a foothold here for so long, and even pull back from the brink many times when the organization was on the verge of extinction, was inseparable from the customer satisfaction that Immortal Castle had built up over a long period of time. The truth was that it wasn't just the underworld of the cultivation world that bought intelligence from Immortal Castle. There were also legitimate clients. In the end, it was just a competition of who had the highest price. As Immortal Castle's highest-level client, President Bai enjoyed lifelong confidentiality, which meant that Immortal Castle wouldn't sell any intelligence on him to outsiders. Similarly, as a partner of this level, apart from the corresponding right to privacy, Immortal Castle also guaranteed his personal safety. Number 60 High. At least in the eyes of the lord of Immortal Castle, it was a pretty sinister place. There were simply too many big shots who had knelt here. Even those who had survived, like that Taoist Tao Tai, were at the very least the junior brother of that history teacher from number 60 High. Now that the lord thought about it carefully, he felt that the reason why Taoist Tao Tai had been able to escape unscathed was definitely because he was related to a teacher from number 60 High. However, the lord of Immortal Castle's kind advice didn't attract the attention of President Bai and that Elder Ji Xing behind him. Elder Ji Xing just accepted the information on behalf of President Bai, then directly inserted the USB into the portable handheld computer he carried with him and started to read it. Number 60 High? Elder Ji Xing felt that this place was a little familiar. It seemed to be a place that had appeared repeatedly in the news recently. President Bai, Elder Ji Xing. I think you should reconsider. The lord was silent for a moment, then said, This school is a little sinister, and our Immortal Castle is already prepared to list the entire school as a restricted area. After that, we won't arrange for any intelligence agents to operate around this school anymore. Is it that bad? Elder Ji Xing laughed cruelly. I remember now. That director Zhuo who's in the limelight now, didn't he graduate from this school? It's a small school, but there are a lot of capable people. Yes. Apart from this youngster who for some reason is still studying at this Foundation Establishment High School, the teachers in this school aren't ordinary people. The lord of the castle stroked his beard and reminded him, previously the destruction of the world-class killer organization Shadowstream was inextricably linked to this school. In fact, in this school, there is indeed a pair of epic-rank killers in the world of assassins. When the lord said this, President Bai's eyebrows finally twitched slightly. Elder Ji Xing asked curiously, Are you talking about that Taoist Tao Tai and gorgeous itinerant? That's right. The castle lord answered honestly. After gorgeous itinerant retired, he became a history teacher in this school. A while ago, his junior brother came to our Immortal Castle to buy information and wanted revenge. Unfortunately, the two of them seemed to have reached a compromise in the end. Other than these two assassins, the rest of the teachers in this school, regardless of their realms, are not easy to deal with. At this point, the castle lord sighed inwardly. He really did his best. In fact, there was some slight exaggeration in this, as he deliberately made the teachers of number 60 High seem very mysterious. But the truth was that apart from gorgeous itinerant, number 60 High's headmaster Chen was currently the only one who could be considered an expert among the teachers of number 60 High. This headmaster Chen wasn't easy to deal with. All in all, while his description was a little exaggerated, the lord of the castle didn't want his important client to have anything to do with this kind of troublesome place. However, not everyone had the same strong desire to survive as the lord. Apart from the slight twitch of his eyebrows just now, President Bai didn't seem to care about number 60 High at all. Ji Xing, I'll leave this school to you. After a brief silence, President Bai gave the order to Elder Ji Xing next to him. How should I deal with it? Elder Ji Xing gave a treacherous smile. Raise it to the ground, President Bai said lightly. All right. Elder Ji Xing nodded. This wasn't the first time they had done this. It was just that the scope this time was much wider. It was just a Foundation Establishment High School. Apart from one or two teachers who were more difficult to deal with than that mysterious youngster, it was basically a one-sided massacre. Instead, Elder Ji Xing felt a little excited. When the time came, as long as President Bai used the Wuji umbrella to divide number 60 High School District into an independent space, Elder Ji Xing would be able to sneak into the space and do whatever he wanted. A confident smile appeared on Elder Ji Xing's face. It was a standard smile with a dagger hidden behind it. Don't worry, Lord President, I'll definitely handle it beautifully. That good-for-nothing Zuowu is too soft-hearted, but I'm different. The lady was also blank when she saw his expression. I haven't asked President Bai, who is this elder? Ji Xing looked at President Bai, who raised his hand to indicate that Elder Ji Xing could reveal his identity. Elder Ji Xing looked at the lord of the castle. I forgot to introduce myself to the two of you. My name is Ji Xing and I am President Bai's #1 weaponsmith. I've been studying on Sun Island all these years, and I only returned to Lord President's side not long ago. When I was studying on Sun Island, some people called me Sonico. Sun Island? The lord of the castle narrowed his eyes. He hadn't realized that this Elder Ji Xing was actually an overseas returnee. But when it came to studying on Sun Island, the lord of the castle immediately had some ideas about this Elder Ji Xing. Judging from his tight-fitting attire, it was very likely that he had been studying ninjutsu from Sun Island. That place was the size of a pellet to begin with, and for him to specially go there to study, it definitely had something to do with ninjutsu. The lord of the castle smiled slightly. It seems that Mr. Ji Xing is proficient in ninjutsu? I can't be considered proficient, it's just my own understanding. Elder Ji Xing smiled. But when it comes to my path of seeking the Dharma, there are too many stories on it. For example, on Sun Island I once encountered a very powerful baldy who used the one-punch ninjutsu, which almost made me suffer a great loss. The lord of the castle, and the result? Fortunately, I only lost an egg. Elder Ji Xing smiled. Previously, my alias was actually Sonic. Chapter 654. In the lady of the castle's office, President Bai and Elder Ji Xing had already left after obtaining the documents they wanted. The lord of the castle's fingers were crossed as he stared ahead with a profound gaze, still feeling very sorry for President Bai's decision to attack number 60 High. The lady would never forget this solemn expression for the rest of her life. In her memory, Immortal Castle had been on the verge of collapse several times, but the lord had never looked as constipated as he did today. In fact, the lady knew very well why the lord was persuading President Bai. It was because President Bai was currently Immortal Castle's most important source of income and guest. If this guest died, Immortal Castle would have to look for someone else. What do you think President Bai's chances of winning are? The lady looked at the lord and couldn't help asking. 10%, or even lower. That's scary? The lady was stunned. In her opinion, President Bai's strength was already exceedingly high. Furthermore, this overseas returnee Elder Ji Xing's aura was clearly higher than Mr. Lu's, and he was an out-and-out super expert. For such an expert to slaughter a Foundation establishment cultivator, it would be as easy as slaughtering a chicken. But the lord actually didn't think he had the slightest chance of winning in the face of a Foundation establishment high school. How little confidence did he have in President Bai and the others for him to make such an assertion? There are times when people have to believe in metaphysics. The lord was very insightful, and his expression was unperturbed. I didn't believe in metaphysics before, but have you noticed that as long as the information we receive has anything to do with number 60 High, nothing good will come out of it? The lady was blank. Thinking about it carefully, she realized that it was true. The lord sighed. With Elder Ji Xing's death, President Bai's left and right arms have all been broken, and I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Given our current financial situation, we can survive for half a year at most, which is far from enough. We have to look for our next target as soon as possible. The lady had no idea that the lord was actually already thinking about what to do next. The lord sighed. Go look through our previous client profiles and see if there are any who currently have a deep cooperative relationship with us. Sell them some information on Elder Ji Xing. The lady, Lord, you mean? What I mean is, you should go and see if there are any crematoria or coffin clients. Sell them information on Elder Ji Xing so that they could prepare in advance. I have a strong feeling that Elder Ji Xing will definitely be in the center of the funeral. But Castle Lord, Demon Hunters Association is our important cooperative client. We've signed a confidentiality agreement. This confidentiality agreement is only for when one is alive. It doesn't say after one's death. It was a busy Sunday. At home, Wang Ling scrolled through the class group chat, which hadn't been idle for even a moment. According to the excellent gossip spy Dopigua, Mother Wan was holding a food tasting event at 4 in the afternoon to invite parents who were free to try her new dishes. The scariest thing was that quite a number of parents actually agreed. The parents didn't know how scary Mother Wan was, but as people who had been through it, no one knew better than the students from number 60 high how scary this kitchen maid was. Mother Wan's fan Bing Bing conned me pretty badly last time. I wonder what she'll come up with this time. Dopey Gua typed in the group with lingering fear. Super Chin laughed through the screen and couldn't help replying, "Everyone, do you still remember the Shadow Stream killers who invaded our school last time?" Everyone? Super Chin, one of them snuck into the school canteen and was killed by Mother Wan with a spoon. I've been thinking that this might be a quicker way to die. Eating slow food might be even more painful. Everyone, Wang Ling, as the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious. Elder Ji Xing hadn't thought much of this small foundation establishment high school at first, but recalling the Lord of Mo Immortal Castle's repeated advice, he decided to come to number 60 high to take a look first. Elder Ji Xing had deliberately disguised himself before going out. He looked very feminine, so it was very easy for him to dress up as a woman. Generally speaking, using a woman's image would greatly lower people's vigilance and make it easier to sneak in. Thus, Elder Ji Xing put on a golden wig, a long black dress and a pair of red high heels as he went out. The wig on his head was very expensive. It was a disguise magic artifact, and not only could he change his hair color at will, he could even adjust its length at will. The most important thing was that the wig was stuck to his scalp the entire time and would blend in with every inch of his scalp, so it wouldn't fall off easily and cause any embarrassment. Elder Ji Xing was very curious about number 60 high. Qingyun Road in Peiyuan District. This was where number 60 high was located. Elder Ji Xing looked up at the sky and noticed that there was a very thick barrier around number 60 high. This school is so run down, but the barrier outside is very thick. Elder Ji Xing couldn't help muttering in his heart. He didn't know that number 60 high's defensive measures had actually already been very good after several enemy attacks. Actually, just 2 months ago, number 60 high didn't even have a decent barrier. Elder Ji Xing had initially wanted to sneak in, but now it looked like he could only break in through the front gate. In the end, when he arrived at number 60 high's front gate, he was greatly disappointed by the scene in front of him. This school was a little small. Not only was it small, its basic facilities weren't very comprehensive. Even through the main gate, he could feel the thick air of history and vicissitudes from this school. Elder Ji Xing didn't want to get close to the dilapidated stone sculpture at the entrance at all. The metal ball on it was covered in rust, the stone platform was covered in moss, and there were even small mushrooms growing on the side. How many germs were on it? Just looking at it, Elder Ji Xing couldn't help shuddering. He was a germaphobe. Elder Ji Xing decided that when they officially charged into the school tomorrow, they would blow up this broken stone sculpture first. He felt that every inch of this cramped school should be cleaned up. Parent, may I ask which teacher you're looking for? Did you report it in advance? Old Li, the school guard, had noticed the blonde girl in front of him right away. Elder Ji Xing smiled slightly and changed her tone to that of a sweet and pleasant girl. Sir, it's like this. Just as Elder Ji Xing was about to make up a reason to fool her and then enter number 60 high to take a look, he never thought that the school guard would directly say, "Parent, are you here to participate in Mother Wan's food tasting?" Food tasting, Elder Ji Xing was blank. Before he could come back to his senses, Old Li directly opened the gate and let him in. "Parent, this way please. Turn right for the canteen."